last season obviously was not the best. It was, you can argue, maybe a little bit of a career low for Russell Wilson, as the tensions between him and the Denver Broncos were just very extreme. Obviously, the fit with Wilson and the Broncos bringing in head coach Sean Payton was just never there, and it ultimately led to a bit of a disastrous situation there. And while I do feel like we are seeing Russell Wilson, I don't know if I'm ready to go quite twilight years of his career. He's definitely past his prime at this point. He believes that he is still capable of providing winning football to an organization, and that's the mission that he is out to prove this year, as he signed a one-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But it has not been a great start so far in training camp, as a couple days ago he ended up getting hurt with a calf injury as he was doing conditioning drills. I believe it was reported that it was as he was pushing a sled of sorts, and he is now being held out for the second straight day of training camp today. And this is obviously also in the midst of a little bit of a quarterback battle, because he is competing with former first-round selection Justin Fields for that starting spot. Fields is another player that feels like he can be a starting quarterback. He was a first-round selection in 2021, and last year I thought that he played the best football of his career. But even still, when it was clear that the Bears were number one on the clock in the draft this year for the second consecutive year, their organization could not justify passing up on using that pick for a quarterback in a second straight year based off of what Fields had shown. And like I mentioned, Fields had his best year of his career last season. I thought he flashed a lot of promise, but in terms of the arm talent and the consistency in the passing game, we haven't really seen it. On top of that, the turnovers have been a very big issue with Justin Fields, especially the fumbling, which is something that you feel like should be something that is pretty easily correctable. But at the same time, just last season, there was a lot of momentum being built, and it seemed like the Justin Fields had a golden opportunity to prove to the Bears that he was worth investing into further, but the Bears couldn't pass up on the opportunity to take Caleb Williams, so that's what they did. And ultimately, when they were shopping Fields around, there weren't very many landing spots for him, so he ends up getting traded to the Steelers for a conditional 6th round draft pick. And now, as things stand, it is Fields and Wilson who both feel like they should be a starting quarterback in the league, and they are competing for that one job. So ultimately, the general consensus here is that Russell Wilson is likely going to get the first shot at the starting quarterback job, but this injury opens the door for Justin Fields to make some noise, because Fields is taking first team reps once again. He was I believe initially listed behind Russell Wilson on that depth chart. It's a little bit of a quarterback battle still, but Wilson, given his experience and such, he has the edge on Justin Fields in this category. We have a comment from Shots Below the Belt. Hard to throw the ball consistently with a bad offensive line. What are the chances of Justin Fields beating out Russell Wilson and having a bounce-back season? Absolutely. Justin Fields was somebody who was, I don't know if I'm ready to fully go done wrong by the Bears. The Bears definitely didn't do him favors. Now, they traded for DJ Moore last season. The offensive line was definitely improved from year 1 to year 3, but also that's not saying all that much, because it was a bit disastrous early on. So I think that there was a lot of promise with Fields. Again, though, the Bears, I can also understand from their perspective, resetting the quarterback market, or not resetting the quarterback market, but resetting the contract that they have to give, because they would have had to pay Justin Fields big money, and there is still a pretty decently sized question mark surrounding what he could be. And I was somebody that I was never really on board with the Justin Fields hype train that was sort of coming around. It felt like last offseason, but I came out of this year definitely feeling a lot better about him. And I do think that there is a real chance that Justin Fields, if given an opportunity with this Steelers offense, that he could show that he would be a worthy starting quarterback. But again, the Steelers, who at this point have been searching for a playoff win. I believe the last time they won in the playoffs was 2016. So as much as, yes, it would be nice for them to end up with a franchise quarterback, Mike Tomlin has been a little bit frustrated with the roster situation there. Now, he did just re-up on a new contract extension to remain the head coach for the foreseeable future. So that is maybe something that can be considered. But ultimately, Russell Wilson is going to have the in. But this is why this time in training camp is very crucial for Justin Fields to show what he has. Because during the season, I don't think that there are going to be necessarily a tremendous amount of opportunities for him, especially if Wilson starts week 1. The Steelers' schedule only gets more difficult as the season is going to progress. We talked about this in the preview for the Steelers season just a few days ago. From week 11 on, you are playing a ton of good defenses. You have the Ravens, the Browns, Bengals, maybe not necessarily an elite defense, but there's an offense on the other side that you're going to have to compete with. You get the Browns again, you get the Eagles, the Ravens again, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. So all of those are projected playoff teams. And Justin Fields, it would take a lot for him, even if you believe in the talent, to go on some type of a winning run down the stretch of this year, headed into an offseason where he is going to try to get paid. So I definitely do think that this is a better situation for Fields, and he is in a good opportunity to bounce back. But again, when is he going to get that opportunity? It feels like to some degree, if he is going to come into this season and really make some noise, it's going to have to be early on, whether it be taking advantage of this opportunity with Russell Wilson not being present for training camp. And I'm sure Tomlin, the way that he has spoken about the quarterback battle, he's going to try and make this as fair as possible. And the idea of you can't lose your job to an injury, I feel like, especially with some degree of unproven. Now, obviously, Russell Wilson has nothing to prove in terms of his legacy. He's already accomplished the peak. He was a top quarterback in the league for a number of years, won a Super Bowl, made it to another. But you know how the NFL works. It is a factory that is constantly revolving. So what have you done for me lately is always the conversation in this league. So Russell Wilson, in that sense, does have something to prove, as does Justin Fields. So it's going to be a quarterback battle that, we're going to be hearing about this, you would have to imagine, all season long, considering we understand that both of these quarterbacks are starting caliber. But it is going to be very interesting to see how all of this plays out. Ultimately, how I think it does is that, you look at the beginning part of the season. I should have uploaded my schedule that I had for the Steelers so you could follow along on screen. But there are a number of very winnable games for the Steelers early on. They're playing the Falcons, who are going to be a good team, but aren't necessarily world beaters by any means. They have the Broncos. They have a young Chargers team. If Russell Wilson can't take advantage of these early opportunities, I think Justin Fields comes in, and we know the upside with Fields is far higher, in my opinion at least, than what Russell Wilson can give you at this point in their career, in their respective careers. But at the same time, this Steelers defense is always competitive. They were top 6 in scoring last year, and they just need some form of consistency from that quarterback position that they didn't get last year with the likes of Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and Mitchell Trubisky. So if Russell Wilson can at least just be a safe option, which, to be fair, also isn't necessarily what Justin Fields was. Like I mentioned, turnovers were a big issue. And what the Steelers are hoping from their offense is they can at least give them a chance to win. And I think that both of these quarterbacks can do that. But it's an interesting conversation in terms of what are they currently looking for. I would imagine it's day one on the field production, but Justin Fields does have still a lot in that tank, I think, and I am rooting for him to find a spot, whether it be with the Steelers or another franchise, because he had a tough go early on in his career, and I do still believe in him. Shots Below the Belt says, if Russell Wilson gets benched this upcoming season, will he ever be looked at as a starter again? I have to say no, because at this point, what are you getting out of Russell Wilson? Like I just mentioned, this is a Steelers team that, no, they're not necessarily a tier 1, probably not tier 2, maybe not even a tier 3 championship contender this season, but they made the playoffs last year with atrocious quarterback play. So what they are hoping, and what any team would be hoping from Russell Wilson at this point, is just to provide stability. And if Russell Wilson can't do so in this situation, I'm curious what team is really going to go and give him another chance. Now, there's still a chance that he could be in the NFL. I feel like Russell Wilson wouldn't be too on board with being a backup quarterback, but I think that ultimately, if Russell Wilson can't succeed in this environment, then and he gets benched, specifically to your question, I don't think that there's going to be another team that's going to say, well, it's worth us just sort of hanging around in middle ground. Now, that being said, if there were a team that I could see giving Russell Wilson a chance after this year, maybe the New York Jets, because the majority of teams at this point, they either have their franchise quarterback or they're looking for their franchise quarterback. There aren't too many teams that feel like they are in that sort of mediocre area but need an upgrade at the quarterback position, and maybe you could look to the NFC South as well and talk yourself into the Saints, but I have a hard time believing that either one of those teams are going to, again, and maybe I'm off base here, and maybe that there are going to be more opportunities, but I feel like if Wilson were to be bad this year and get benched, I just feel like the chances of him landing on his feet somewhere else are low. Now, again, I think that there is somewhat of a roadmap towards him being able to maybe find one of those middling teams and giving them a chance, but I'm not totally sure. It says, him as a backup kind of gives me Tyrod Taylor vibes. And Tyrod Taylor is, I think, one of the best backup quarterbacks, really, that we've had in the NFL for years. No, he's not necessarily going to, transform your franchise by any means, but Tyrod Taylor is a very solid veteran presence. Now, the question is Russell Wilson's accomplished enough in his career that he could walk away from the game of football without being a journeyman backup quarterback, and he would still be satisfied with the results. He expects more out of himself, but at the same time, he can provide you that leadership, and for whatever it's worth, and this is a point I wanted to make, and Tyrod Taylor, the way he plays sort of ties into that. I do love for the Steelers this season how Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are at least a little bit cut from the same cloth. Russell Wilson was one of the, original improviser quarterbacks where, any broken play he could turn into a massive gain somehow. And Justin Fields has that potential to some degree. He's leaned very heavily in being a run-first quarterback over the past couple years. And last year, they sort of went away from it. I almost wish the Bears would have embraced the fact that Justin Fields was literally one of the top rushers in the league in 2022. Now, I don't expect that for Wilson, but like we just talked about on the show the other day, Russell Wilson had his career high in rush attempts, or not his career high, but the most rush attempts he's had in a season since 2022 it was, I believe, and that's with him getting benched partway through the year. So it seems like Wilson is willing to use his legs, do whatever it takes for him to carve out a role for himself. And I think that, ultimately, I'm rooting for both of these players because they are both starting caliber to some degree. Now, I am probably a little bit lower than mainstream media is on Russell Wilson at this point, but I do think that they both give you chances to win in their own right. But again, if I'm the Steelers, I understand there's so much pressure in that organization right now to win playoff games, but Justin Fields may still be special. And that's the one that I'm really pulling for because, again, Wilson has already shown that he is, I would have to imagine he's a Hall of Famer at this point. It would be an interesting debate. I think that Wilson probably meets that category, but that would be a little bit of an interesting conversation there. Let me know whether or not you think Wilson is a Hall of Famer. But he is not the only quarterback that is undergoing some types of limitations in practice at this point, because yesterday we got news a little bit more on the other side of the spectrum that Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins has been medically cleared to practice in training camp so far. So we're going to break down exactly what the specifics that came out along with that are and what we can expect from Cousins headed into, I believe, his age 36 season and coming off of a torn Achilles. So we'll be diving into all of that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.